Welcome to this explainer. To really grasp the architecture of the world we live in today, we've got to go back to 1945. We're stepping back into a world fresh out of the ashes of the most devastating conflict in human history. The dust is finally settling on World War II, but instead of lasting tranquility, the globe is immediately thrust into a high-stakes geopolitical chess match. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with a fractured post-war peace, move into ideologies and the Iron Curtain, and then cover alliances and global institutions. From there, we'll examine the nuclear arms race, rebuilding a broken world, and finally, the Cold War's lasting legacy. All right, part one, a fractured post-war peace. So the Allied forces had just defeated the Axis powers, right? But that wartime cooperation unraveled almost instantly. The playing field was entirely cleared, leaving the United States and the Soviet Union standing alone on the global stage as the two dominant superpowers. And pretty much everything that follows is a result of these two titans trying to figure out how to share the exact same planet. Actually, the groundwork for this massive conflict was laid before victory was even fully secured. Take the Yalta Conference in February 1945. You've got FDR, Churchill, and Stalin negotiating the post-war order. Stalin agrees to free elections in liberated nations, but quickly breaks those promises in places like Poland and Czechoslovakia. Fast forward just a few months to Potsdam in July, and the trust is completely gone. President Truman and Stalin are just openly clashing over the future of Germany and Soviet war reparations. Moving on to Section 2, Ideologies and the Iron Curtain. Now, you might be wondering, why couldn't these two superpowers just agree to disagree? Well, their underlying ideologies made cooperation pretty much impossible. Look at this stark contrast. On one side, Truman's United States championed democracy and free market capitalism. On the flip side, Stalin's Soviet Union operated under communism, actively seeking authoritarian expansion across Europe and Asia. These were fundamentally incompatible systems, and they formed the absolute core of this global rivalry. The reality of this divide set in fast. In March 1946, Winston Churchill delivers a speech with immense historical weight, declaring an Iron Curtain has descended across the continent. He absolutely hit the nail on the head. This wasn't just a metaphor, it was the stark geopolitical reality of Eastern Europe being completely sealed off from the free world by Soviet-dominated governments. And nowhere was this divide more agonizingly literal than in Germany. The country was physically fractured into two distinct halves, the Federal Republic in the west and the Soviet-backed German Democratic Republic in the east. With millions of people suddenly trapped behind that Iron Curtain, a single divided nation became the perfect microcosm for a fractured globe. So how does the U.S. respond? With the containment policy. Born from diplomat George Kennan's famous 1946 long telegram, this became the ultimate American blueprint for the era. The idea was simple but massive. Soviet expansion had to be contained wherever it appeared. Truman enacted this in 1947 with the Truman Doctrine, actively pledging support to nations resisting communist insurgencies, and they started right away with Greece and Turkey. Which brings us to Section 3, Alliances and Global Institutions. To protect these spheres of influence, both superpowers started building vast networks of military alliances. It's kind of like a geopolitical scorecard. In the West, collective defense was formalized through NATO in 1949, establishing that an attack on one was an attack on all, followed by treaties like CETO and the OAS. The East countered right back in 1955 with the Warsaw Pact, locking the communist satellite states into a rival military bloc. The world was now firmly, officially divided. Alongside these rival military blocs, there was an attempt at global unity. The United Nations was founded in October 1945 with 51 original members, and it was designed to prevent future world wars through collective security. But there was a fatal flaw. The Security Council granted permanent members, including both superpowers, veto power. Because the US and the Soviets were constantly at odds, this structure paralyzed the organization during major Cold War disputes. Okay, Section 4, the nuclear arms race. This is where the geopolitical chess match suddenly escalated to the potential annihilation of humanity. The U.S. held a brief atomic monopoly after the Manhattan Project in 1945, but by 1949, aided by espionage from spies like Klaus Fuchs, the Soviet Union pulled off its own atomic test. From there, it was an all-out sprint. The U.S. tests a vastly more powerful hydrogen bomb in 1952, both sides stockpile thousands of warheads, and it all culminates in the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, which brought the world within days of total nuclear war. It begs a pretty chilling question, doesn't it? What actually happens when both sides possess the power to just end the world? Well, the answer was mutually assured destruction, or MAD for short. This doctrine basically guaranteed that any nuclear attack would trigger a devastating counterstrike, which ironically made nuclear war completely irrational for both sides. It served as a terrifying yet effective form of deterrence. It's exactly why, right after the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy and Khrushchev established the Moscow-Washington hotline to ensure no simple misunderstanding could accidentally end the world. Let's pivot to Section 5, Rebuilding a Broken World. While the military standoff was terrifying, there was an entirely different front to the Cold War, and that was economic recovery. The United States channeled a staggering $13 billion, equivalent to well over $150 billion today, into the war-devastated economies of Western Europe through the 1948 Marshall Plan. This massive investment triggered the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle of West Germany in the 1950s. Through American-backed currency reform and free market policies, a former enemy was transformed into an incredibly stable, prosperous ally right in the heart of Europe. Make no mistake, economic recovery wasn't just charity, it was strategic containment. And we see this exact same strategy applied in Japan. The American occupation, led by General Douglas MacArthur, completely restructured the nation. They rewrote the Constitution and broke up wartime industrial conglomerates. Then, as U.S. priorities shifted to containing communism in Asia, they aggressively encouraged rapid Japanese industrial growth. By the 1960s, Japan had emerged as a major global economic power and a vital bulwark against Soviet influence. Finally, Section 6, the Cold War's lasting legacy. The rivalries established in these tense early years didn't just fade, they shaped our world for decades. Containment directly drove massive military interventions in Korea and Vietnam. The Marshall Plan proved that economic aid is an incredibly powerful foreign policy tool. And think about the technological leaps. When the Soviets launched Sputnik in 1957, it triggered the space race, leading to the creation of NASA and the Apollo moon landings. Eventually, the sheer terror of the arms race forced both sides to the negotiating table, producing treaties like SALT and the INF Treaty to gradually place limits on those massive arsenals. But you can never fully close Pandora's box once it's open. Despite best efforts like the 1968 Non-Proliferation Treaty, the nuclear age just couldn't be neatly contained between two superpowers. Nations like China, France, India, and Pakistan went on to develop their own independent atomic arsenals, permanently altering the global balance of power. So here is a final thought for you. As we look at today's geopolitical alliances, how much of our modern world is still defined by the lines drawn during the Cold War? When you watch the news today, look at the military pacts and the economic strategies at play. You'll quickly realize that the architectural foundations built during this era are literally still holding up the world we live in right now. Keep looking closely at the structures around you, because history is never truly in the past. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.